美国1月16日星期四，众议院再传捷报。当天，众议院以压倒性票数通过了 HR30 法案，即防止非法移民对女性施暴法。据悉，该法案要求对那些被定罪或承认性犯罪或家庭暴力的移民进行驱逐，并禁止他们进入美国。分析人士认为，在新一届国会的头几天，共和党人在国会山不断强调更严格的移民执法问题，不仅是在展示他们在当选总统唐纳川普就职后将如何使用其三位一体的治理能力，还是在测试在2024年选举失利后民主党人将向右派妥协的程度。而看样子，共和党人的这一策略似乎奏效了。在针对 HR30 法案的投票中，有61位民主党人站在了共和党人的一边，共同支持该法案，而去年这一数字仅为51。最终，防止非法移民对女性施暴法以274票对145票的压倒性胜利获得了通过，真是可喜可贺。
On this vote, the yeas are 274 and the nays are 145. The bill is passed. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
视线转向参议院，在参议院会议上，共和党高级参议员约翰·科尔宁严厉指控总统拜登在任期最后几天内滥用权力。
President's 4 days until President Trump will be inaugurated for the second time as President of the United States. That means we only have 4 more days of President Biden's absentee leadership. But he seems to be making the most of his final days as he goes out the door, and he certainly isn't letting it kick him on the way out. I think the most egregious example of the abuse of power, really, that President Biden is engaged in now that the election's over and he doesn't have to stand for a vote among the American people, so he pretty much has given him a thumb in the eye. Perhaps one of the most egregious examples of this was his pardon of his son Hunter on December the 1st of last year. Despite numerous efforts by the FBI and DOJ to protect Hunter Biden for the accountability for his crimes, President Biden decided to attack his own Department of Justice and say his son was selectively and unfairly prosecuted. Well, it's hard to imagine someone thinking they were unfairly targeted when entire government agencies did everything they could to protect him from coming to justice. And thanks to a diligent and careful judge who was able to expose a sweetheart deal that would have exonerated Hunter Biden previously. So he was convicted of illegally possessing a firearm, and he stood charged with massive tax fraud. President Biden said time and time again, "I promise I'm not going to pardon him." And then he turned around and he did. But he didn't stop there. He used his last days of his office to go on a little pardon spree, granting clemency to 39 individuals, as well as commuting the sentences of convicted murderers on death row. These people were convicted of crimes ranging from conspiracy to commit wire fraud to, in a mortgage fraud scheme, to stealing government property, to signing false documents, bank theft, participating in income tax fraud, and a misuse of a Social Security number. But the truth is, these are not victimless crimes, and they're not the sort of occurrences we want to see happening more frequently. There's a reason why our criminal justice system provides for accountability and punishment in appropriate circumstances. That's to set an example for others not to go down that path and to have some measure of accountability, which is an important part of justice. These sentenced criminals were not the only people that got a last-minute gift from President Biden. On January 4th, President Biden announced a list of 19 new recipients of the Presidential Medal of Freedom. This included George Soros and others. George Soros, of course, is a billionaire philanthropist who's doled out billions of dollars to left-wing political causes, from defund the police movements to anti-Israel organizations to those who promote open borders such as we have experienced tragically over the last 4 years. Of course, these are the same policies that have caused so much suffering and frustration among the American people, which they voted on. I believe it was a referendum on November the 5th, voted to change the direction the country was headed in, because most Americans, according to public opinion polling, felt like America was on the wrong path and needed a change of course. And now a key architect of those failed policies was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Talk about devaluing an award that's supposed to be given for extraordinary service to the country. Of course, I support the rights of individuals to be generous with their wealth. America is one of the most generous countries in the world, and I think it's something we should be proud of. I imagine how our colleagues on the other side of the aisle might act if Republicans honored a prominent conservative philanthropist. You think the media or our Democratic colleagues would applaud it in the same way? No chance. Conservative philanthropists have been not only not given medals of freedom, they've been subjected to endless scrutiny, including politically motivated subpoenas from our Democratic colleagues on the Judiciary Committee just this last year. But now Democrats are rewarding their own, the Presidential Medal of Freedom. It's like the hearing we had this morning on the Finance Committee. Scott Bessent, the next Secretary of Treasury, was there. We had to listen to the ranking member go on a diatribe about why it is so important that American taxpayers be exposed to a multi-trillion-dollar tax increase. Now, he said this is about tax cuts for the wealthy, but the fact of the matter is, and the nominee pointed this out, that the top 1% in the country pay the vast majority of income taxes. But the facts apparently are not all that important to our Democratic colleagues. President Biden wasn't finished rewarding his friends with grants of clemency and presidential honors before he left office. He also sent a parting gift to one of his favorite beneficiaries, which are radical climate activists. Now, I don't doubt that the climate's changing. I don't doubt humans have an impact on it. But to say this is the end-all, be-all of all of our policies to the detriment of our economy, job creation, and so many other important issues just strikes me as misguided. One of the consequences is that Americans have been suffering under high prices for energy under President Biden's presidency. Electricity prices have risen more than 30%. We know that these high prices are the direct result of President Biden's policies, which put climate activists in the front seat, while working families are left behind. The president couldn't help himself from doing more damage on the way out the door. The day after Christmas, President Biden's Energy Department finalized new climate regulations that would functionally ban almost all natural gas-powered water heaters. Now, why would he do something like that? An analysis from the American Gas Association estimates that 40% of customers will be directly impacted by a rule with a net cost increase, since they'll be required to buy a new new electric water heater. The AGA notes that the households affected are largely low income and senior citizens on a fixed income, who are more likely to choose a cost-effective water heater that will now be banned under the rule. Now, of course, if people want to buy a more expensive water heater with their own money, I've got no objection to that. I'm all for their freedom to do so. But to impose additional costs on seniors who have fixed incomes and other low-income families who are struggling to get by under the high prices and the 40-year high inflation under the Biden administration simply adds insult to injury. But President Biden didn't stop there. 2 weeks ago, the Biden administration gave the state of California to enforce zero-emission rules for lawnmowers and leaf blowers. Now, this may sound like a small thing, but it's emblematic of much bigger things. and it adds up. This rule would prohibit the sale of new equipment under 25 horsepower or 19 kilowatts that fail to achieve zero emissions. Is there no home appliance or device that's safe from this radical agenda? The Biden administration has targeted gas-powered cars, gas stoves, water heaters, and now they want to get after our lawn mowers and leaf blowers. As I've said before, I don't have any objection to anyone who wants to improve their carbon footprint, if that's important to them, by purchasing new low-emissions lawnmowers. God bless them if they want to do that. But for working families to have to deal with this mandate, who are just trying to keep up with inflation, a new lawnmower might not be in their budget. Well, suffice it to say, the Biden administration is working hard on the way out the door and wreaking havoc in the process. But, Mr. President, Republicans are taking note. We know that with President Trump being sworn into office next Monday, with new majorities in the House and the Senate, that things are going to change. The American people voted for change, and they're going to see a change away from these radical policies and special interest pieces of legislation or regulation that hurt the vast majority of Americans for the benefit of an ideological agenda. The tools we're going to be using is something called the Congressional Review Act. As the presiding officer knows, this is a powerful tool which allows a vote of Congress and a presidential signature to essentially veto an administrative agency rule. There is a time frame, I believe it's 60 legislative days, during which we can look back and essentially impose a legislative veto of that rule. Using this mechanism, Congress can review and rescind regulations that it disapproves of. Because, of course, many of these regulations, of course, are promulgated by administrative agencies that never have to stand for election. They never have to appeal to the voters. They never have to explain themselves to the voters. They just do what they do, which is create more and more red tape and regulation. So I'm glad we're going to be able to focus soon, after we confirm President Trump's cabinet, on Congressional Review Act regulatory disapprovals. I plan on introducing a few of these myself so we can reverse many of the Biden administration's misguided regulations. And I know other colleagues plan to do the same thing. So, Mr. President, President Biden may have been busy over the last few months since the November the 5th election, but we are gearing up to be even busier undoing much of the mischief that he has wrought during these last couple of months on his way out the door.
而在白宫方面，国务卿安东尼·布林肯在新闻简报会上发表告别演说时，被亲巴勒斯坦记者打断，场面尴尬异常。
I have even greater respect, even greater appreciation for you asking the tough questions, for you holding us to account. Sometimes that's not always the most comfortable thing, not always the most enjoyable thing, but it is the most necessary thing in our democracy.
Reporters in Gaza were on the receiving end of your bombs. Why did you keep the bombs flowing when we had a deal?
I'm happy to address questions.
We all knew we had a deal. Everyone in this room knows we had a deal, Tony, and you kept the bombs flowing.
I'm happy to address questions when we get a chance. Thank you.
Based order on the mantle of your commitment to Zionism. Did you want to finish? Why did you allow my friends to be massacred? Why did you?
I'm happy to address your questions when we get to questions. Thank you. Thank you.
You helped destroy our religion, Judaism, by associating.
Yeah, I have a statement. Yeah, I have a statement to make. Thank you.
You waved the white flag before Netanyahu. You waved the white flag before Israeli fascists.
I look forward to taking questions when I get a chance to finish my statement. Thank you.
Your grandfather was an Israel lobbyist. Are you compromised by Israel? Why did you allow the Holocaust of our time to happen? How does it feel to have your legacy be genocide? How does it feel to have your legacy be genocide? You too, Matt. You smirk through the whole thing every day. You smirk through a genocide.
Thank you. And thank you, Matt.
最后，千呼万唤始出来，国务卿提名人马尔科·卢比奥的参议员席位接替者终于浮出了水面。当天，佛罗里达州州长罗恩·德桑蒂斯宣布， 他提名佛州总检察长阿什利·穆迪替补佛州在参议院的空缺席位。可以说，阿什利·穆迪无疑是佛州政坛一位冉冉升起的新星。作为州检察长，穆迪是拜登的严厉批评者，他曾因多次起诉拜登政府而闻名，诉讼涉及非法移民、跨性别权利、新冠疫情政策和学生贷款豁免等，非常广泛。不过需要注意的是，穆迪也是德桑蒂斯最亲密的政治盟友之一。在2024年共和党总统初选中，穆迪可是唯一支持德桑蒂斯而非川普的佛罗里达州内阁级官员。尽管如此，考虑到自德桑蒂斯结束竞选以来，穆迪就一直将自己塑造成一位忠实的 MAGA 支持者。未来，穆迪应该不太可能会成为川普推动 MAGA 议程的参议院阻力。而如果成功替补，49岁的穆迪则将成为佛州历史上第2位女性参议员，并成为仅有的10几位年龄在50岁以下的参议员之一，为参议院带来新的年轻声音。最后，就让我们一起听听穆迪在德桑蒂斯宣布提名后的发言吧。
Governor, I want you to know I will not let you down, I will not let the citizens of Florida down, and I will not let my country down. It was just 6 years ago that I met this very eager, passionate guy who wanted to be the governor of Florida and said, if we go in there and we implement conservative policy, if we scale back, make sure we return this to a limited government, we will prosper. And look at what Florida has done since. We lead the nation in net migration, new business formation, and law and order. I can go on, and it has been at the leadership and direction with this guy right here. And I am proud not to just say I have fought alongside you for 6 years, but I'm proud to call you a friend, and I am very honored with this nomination. Thank you so much. I will bring the same persistence and passion and tenacity as a United States Senator that I have brought as Florida's Attorney General. If you have worked with me and fought with me over the last 6 years, you know I don't think of this as a job. I think of it as a calling. Every day I go to work, every decision that I make, every person I hire, I do so with the understanding that the people of Florida gave me this opportunity, and I want to deliver on what I assured them, and that was we were going to protect their rights, we were going to protect the autonomy of this state, we were going to protect our communities. And I believe that we have done that, and I think we have to take that same direction to the United States Senate. This guy used to be in Congress, and he says to me and has said to me, I don't know why anybody would want that job. I said to him, I kind of agree with you, Governor. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm pretty energetic. I like to get things done, focus on problems, solve the problems, deliver those to the people that hired you, your bosses, the citizens. And there's a lot of deadlock in Washington. And then I thought more about that. And I thought, if every person with the same energy, the same love, the respect for our founding principles, the ideals on which this country was built on, if every person like that with that personality said, I don't think I'd like serving in Congress, then we'd never change that culture. And so you're probably right. I probably won't like it. But I'm ready to show up and fight for this nation and fight for President Trump to deliver the American First agenda on day one. What has angered me the most as Attorney General, as I've had to fight the Biden administration over the last 4 years, when we have seen policy after rule, after financial decisions, spending out of these agencies, as the agencies have gotten bigger, as they have taken more power, as they have tried to tell the states what to do more and more and more, all that does is take the will of the people, the want of the people through their elected representatives in Congress, and turns this into a country we don't even recognize anymore. And whether it's agencies making these decisions when lawmakers should, unelected bureaucrats, or whether it's international organizations making decisions that our lawmakers should, we cannot stand for that. The only way to return this country to the people who govern it, is to make sure we have a strong Congress doing its job, passing laws, and actually approving the regulations that these unelected bureaucrats are trying to cram down on the American people. And I pledge to you, as a United States Senator, supporting the REINS Act, supporting any effort to rein back in our out-of-control federal agencies, make sure politics is pushed out of it, make sure we bring down spending. I am all for that, and I've got the backs of the American people, DOJ, and President Trump on that. I am driven by many things in life. I will bring the influence of many things in my life, my experiences certainly, but I am driven by my faith in God, first and foremost. I am driven by the fact that I am a mother and I still have a kid in school. And whether it was protecting children from social media, from the dangers of fentanyl, the poison that's being pushed into our nation as the result of a wide open border, whether it's protecting our soldiers, the oldest boy in our family is a soldier. So whether it is supporting them while they are abroad or after they come home, I have their backs. And last but not least, God has blessed me with an amazing husband who's with me, Justin. When I told him I wanted to leave the bench, now mind you, I may be the first senator governor, I don't know if this went into your plan, he was most excited I'm a trained accountant, so I can shrink the bloat of the federal government. But I also served over a decade in the judiciary. I have now served in the executive branch. I may be the only United States senator that is now in my third branch of government and bringing all of that with me to the role. An amazing husband who has watched and been there with me while I railed on what was happening to this country as millions poured illegally into our country, watching the devastation and crime and overdose rates in our country. He has stood by me, never doubted when I said I wanted to resign from being a judge and travel around the state and be unemployed and get people to hire me to be their lawyer. He said, I've got your back, partly because he's my husband, partly because he's a law enforcement officer and he knew he needed someone as the top cop that had their backs. So, to my husband, law enforcement officer, and my new family of law enforcement that has been with me over the last 6 years, you better believe, as a United States Senator, I will work for you, those that stand on that thin line between chaos and order, between safety and crime. I have got your back. I've got your six. And we will all work to protect the American people and make all of our cities and states stronger and safer together. And so I have one message right now to President Trump and to my new colleagues on the United States Senate. America first. Let's get it done. Thanks so much.